Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Rest Day with Jack Haig. I'll keep this intro pretty short because I sat down and had a chat with Alex Dowsett, and he loves a good chat. We go into all things, talking about his 12 years as a professional cyclist, how time trialing has changed because that was his speciality during his time as a professional. We go into talking about this year's World Championships, especially talking about the time trial that happened there, Remco's mishap of having no power meter, and how GC guys seem to do very well in Grand Tour TTs, but maybe not so well in individual day TTs. We also touch on retirement, what it's like to retire as a professional, what goes on when you retire, and parenting. He also became a parent when he was a current professional, and we go into how that sort of changes your approach to being a professional athlete and how life changes as a parent. Now, I really hope you enjoy this. I'm going to work on setting up a soundbite link for the upcoming episodes where you can send in your own voice recordings for questions to answer during the podcast. I'll put the link to that in the Discord channel. And always, thanks everyone for the conversation and the feedback on the Discord channel. And for anything coming up, please write it in there and I'll do my best to get back to you guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Alex Dowsett. I had a great time chatting to him and I think there'll be some pretty interesting points in there. Hey, Alex Dowsett. Welcome to the Rest Day with Jack Haig. How's it going?
It's good. Every day's a rest day.
For you now. Yeah. You're a retired cyclist.
Yeah. 2 years, coming up to 2 years, almost exactly 2 years now since my last race. I'd say in my last year, I checked out a little bit before my last race. I know the team didn't know whether I'd be turning up to chrono donations or not. And I did turn up with the family, and I think it was the first time trial I ever just rode round. Without really, I just enjoyed riding my time trial bike quite fast.
For the sake of time trialing.
Yes.
Now, before we get too far into retirement, we probably should apologize. We're currently sitting in a random hotel in the middle of Catalonia, about to go to a wedding later today. So there is a tiny bit of echo here, but I managed to catch Alex in Spain, in Catalonia, to be able to do this podcast in person, because I was going to try and do this on the internet, but face-to-face is much nicer. Now, 12 years pro, turned pro with Team Sky, retired in 22, like we were saying. You won 2 Giro stages, 6 times national champion, individual time trial, Commonwealth Games, individual time trial, Euro champs, and our record.
I think we both won a stage at the Tour of Poland in the same year as well.
We did. I was looking at this, and I wanted to bring this up. I don't have it in my notes, but you won the TT.
I did.
Now, the day before the TT was actually cancelled.
It was.
And the day before the day that was cancelled is possibly one of the worst days I've had as a professional cyclist.
It was biblical.
It was biblical.
Yeah,
and of the about 160 people that started Tour of Poland, there was about 70 people started the time trial on the last day because about 70 people pulled out.
Yeah, I remember that day. It was the Tour of Poland that year should have been ashamed of themselves. It was getting dark by the time we finished. We were on the wrong side of 6 hours in the Gruppetto.
No, I'm pretty sure the day before it got cancelled, where everyone, because I was in the Gruppetto as well, and we all missed time cut.
Oh.
And we were all allowed back in the race because there were so many of us missed time cut. And I think we were like close to 7 hours. I think I got to the bus.
Yeah.
And like it was dark outside. Like the cars behind us had the lights on.
Yes. I remember Pete Kenner got on. The worst thing about that race, it was a 50k loop that we did twice.
Yes.
So we crossed the finish line at 125k, 175k, and then 225k. At 175k, Pete Kenner got onto his team bus where he had a jacket that Rafa made especially for like just biblical conditions.
Was this the one that had like the electronic heating inside?
Yeah, heating elements inside. He took it out the wrapper, pulled the labels off, put it on, got back out on the bus, jumped on his bike, caught up the Gruppetto and finished the race. It was, oh yeah, it was a dark day.
So yeah, I had seen that in my research for this podcast and I didn't have it in my notes, but I do remember that distinctively. 12 years pro, time trialing changed a lot in those 12 years.
Did.
What was maybe your favorite era of time trialing those 12 years? And what was the biggest thing that influenced time trialing over those 12 years?
A lot did change. I had to change with it. I mean, aerodynamics was the big thing. You could aerodynamics as the major part of the marginal gains, and it's a phrase that gets banded around so much, but it was the case with time trialing, and it didn't just happen in the World Tour. It happened on the track. It happened in domestic level time trialing in the UK. Everyone just got a lot faster, and it wasn't power output wise doing roughly the same as what I was doing 2011, 2012. I think I won a stage of Tour of Britain in 2011 with about between 420 and 440 watts, and that kind of power would still be good enough to beat if your aero package is good. That kind of power is still good enough to be at the sharp end of time trials nowadays. So it's the everything else that's changed. I think everyone's got far easier access to wind tunnels now. It's so a lot more people do aero testing.
On this, do you think now that we've gone so far down this sort of rabbit hole of optimizing things, that previously, maybe at the beginning of your career, there was a bigger range of teams that were doing well in time trials, whereas now you see certain teams place maybe 3 guys pretty consistently inside the top 10, and it seems that if you're not on one of these teams that has kind of optimized everything really well, that you're already a little bit set back, and it's quite hard to get results in time trials?
Yes. Yeah. Certainly you see more of the like Jumbo, UAE, Ineos back then, yes. Perhaps now, maybe on the time trial, yes. Still placing a lot of guys towards the sharp end. Obviously, you exclude Ghana from that conversation. So yeah, absolutely. And that's a multitude of things. I think, skin suit supplier, whether it be the logo that's written on their suit or whether they've gone and white labeled it. Aero testing, just knowledge base. Who's at the? It's like anyone can go to a wind tunnel, but it's actually who's running the show there and hit their mentality around it.
And probably also the flexibility in the team that you ride for to want to try different equipment and then be able to push sponsors if there is another piece of equipment that is faster than what they sponsored, to either make something equivalent or allow the athlete to use a different sponsored equipment. I know during your career you used sometimes non-sponsor equipment that was then black labeled or had no labeling on it. Yeah. So I think it depends a little bit on the team as well that you're in. Yeah, absolute open-mindedness. Whether you have traditionally older men who have been in the sport for an awful long time, it's like, well, that's the way we've always done it. I mean, Movistar was the ultimate in. They had a weird mix. There's a huge amount of history there, and there's a huge amount of we do things the way we always do it because it works. And I think there's merit in some of that, but then it's being open-minded enough to go, well, actually, can that works be improved? And doing that. And at Movistar, I felt had a good balance with that, despite some fairly obvious, like Fran Ventoso said to me when I questioned why we had a good team bus and a bad team bus, like a big one and a small one. Yeah. And I went to my first Giro and I thought we'd be in the big one, but the small one was there. And Fran said, I said to him, why is the shit bus here? He went, well, because we're in Italy and this bus driver does the races in Italy and this is his bus. It's like, but there's a really nice bus. And he's like, yep, I know. He's like, Alex, you'll notice when we go to the Tour of Qatar, which is the flattest race on the planet, on your spare bike will be climbing wheels. Why? Because that's the way they've always done it. Yeah. All right. Tangent question here for my own curiosity. You've ridden for a couple of different teams. Yeah. Which team had the best bus?
Which team had the best bus? It wasn't Israel. They inherited the Quebecer bus, and Giacomo Nizzolo got on the bus, having come from Quebec. And was like, "Whoa, we don't want this one. This one breaks down." And he was correct. Movistar's good bus was very good.
What makes a good bus?
It was very airy inside, and seats were comfortable. The layout was like as it should be, with everyone had an individual seat. Like, we had some weird buses where there'd be strange, like, coach style seats, and then a couple of bench seats, and
this is horrible.
A weird kind of arrangement in the back. To be honest with you, I still think it's quite an unoptimized area if someone really wanted to get into like coach works of buses.
So I think there's about 3 companies in Europe that make different buses, because we have a new bus in Bahrain, and I think there's one in Spain, one in France, and then one somewhere in like the Netherlands or Belgium or something like this.
Yeah.
And from talking to other people asking about buses, apparently the one in France that does the buses is the nicest one.
Okay.
But if you want one of the expanding buses, like the new Ineos one or the new UAE one, you need to go to the Belgium or Netherlands company.
What do you mean expanding?
So like the side of the bus comes out, so you get extra space. So now both Ineos and UAE have some new buses.
I would have won so many more races if I'd had an expanding
bus. All right, okay, change it. Back on topic. So time trialing changed a lot over the years. Now, we start to see in Grand Tours, something that I find quite interesting is you have GC riders, for example, Jonas Vingegaard, Tadej Pogačar, doing super well, or Primož Roglič, in a Grand Tour time trial.
Yeah.
But then in one-off TTs, or maybe even in some week-long stage races, they don't perform anywhere near as well. And something that stood out to me recently was Primož won the last stage of Vuelta, which was a time trial, went to World Championships a week and a half later, or a week later, and was caught by Ghana. And I don't think placed inside the top 5.
No.
What is this? What makes a time... Well, there's maybe not so many time trial specialists now, but what makes a time trial specialist better at those one-day races? And why aren't they doing better in Grand Tour? And why are the GC guys...
It's a very good question. There's possibly an element of fatigue in there. You take some... I remember a conversation around Cancellara being a GC rider, where he said he couldn't do it because of the sheer amount of torque that he would have to produce over a multitude of days to be a GC rider in a Grand Tour.
He just missed the shorter crank phase.
Just me, obviously, yeah. And like the cumulative effect of that over days compared with a 50-kilo rider. So there's an obvious one going like the final stage of the Vuelta is a very different beast to, and I know you'll know, I know, like, you do a Grand Tour time trial, you feel like shit on the warm up, that's a given. You feel like shit when you wake up, that's a given. And then you roll down the ramp and after 5 minutes, you know what you've got.
Yes.
Whereas having never been a GC rider in a Grand Tour in my life, I would imagine that those boys are trained a little bit more to be good on those TT days.
Just more fatigue resistance over time, and maybe the mental aspect of being comfortable being fatigued and not having nice feelings, but continuously pushing yourself. Whereas maybe a time trial specialist is used to having that very fresh feeling when they're going into a week long or an individual day time trial.
Yeah, no, yeah. If the time trial is say 2 weeks deep into a Grand Tour, I always thought you've got your guys at the front who are racing every day, and obviously every day is like on right to the finish line. And then you got guys like me in the gruppetto who there's an argument that we're having an easier day, but we're also having a longer day.
Yeah.
I think if you accumulate like the amount of like my Grand Tour versus Jonas's Grand Tour, I've basically done 2 extra stages compared to him in time. You know, there should be an award for that, really.
I think it's called the Lantern Rouge Award.
Yeah, but so there's definitely a cumulative thing. I wonder if there's a recon aspect as well, because I don't think time trial specialists generally go It's very rare compared with GC riders go to a time trial to recon it. And then if we look at, it's like the TT that keeps coming up because he wiped the floor with Pogacar, Jonas's TT in 2023. You look at that, every corner, he knew what he could have done that blindfolded, I reckon. And that was, if you're chipping away 2 or 3 seconds at every corner and there's 20 corners, that's 40 seconds.
It's a lot at the end.
Yeah. So I think there's probably that's got something to do with it as well.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting watching the World's TT and seeing Roglic getting caught by Gunnar. And I was like, wow, that guy just won the last stage of Welter. And he won Welter overall. Yeah. And you would think he'd do pretty good here, but
it's not the first time he's appeared in someone else's finishing photo as well, either.
No.
With Rowan and Harrogate.
This is true.
He line stabbed him as well.
On World Championships, Remco dropped his chain on the start ramp, running the 1x chain ring. And then afterwards, he said that he actually didn't have a power meter for the whole race. One, how much faster is a 1x chain ring? I'm sure you probably know this. And then how important for you was your power meter when you were racing time trials? And do you think Remco would have gone faster had his power meter worked?
Power meters in time trials, that's something that has been plaguing me as to whether it's good or bad. If you can time trial, if you have no problem in putting yourself in the hurt locker, I think a power meter is only useful for the first 3 minutes of a TT. Just to not, and only if you're disciplined enough to call your jets. Not sort of, I always found first TT of the year, it'd generally be a 10-mile TT, 16K local to me. Not even a start ramp, roll off, and you'd look down, you'd see a number that's far bigger than it should be, like 600-700. You'd settle in, you'd do the first minute or two at 500 watts. And the thought process would be like, maybe today's the day that I can do 500 watts for 20 minutes. And then you'd find out pretty rudely around about the 4-minute mark that it isn't. And then it's a pretty horrible experience for the rest of it. Whereas if you settle in straight away at your target power for that first 3 minutes, you kind of let your body catch up to the effort, and then you can almost switch the power meter off because that you've got what you've got then. And then I think, if you have a good feeling for it, you can lift it a bit for the climbs, and if you're confident enough to drop it, I think there's an awful lot of instances where power meters made time trialists slower. I think people want to get back to the bus or the village hall and say, I did
X watts, rather than saying I averaged X speed and I got this place because speed is what wins me time trials.
Nothing tanks an average speed, average power like a downhill where you freewheel. You just watch that power fall off a cliff and it breaks your heart. Now, if you can't see that, it doesn't matter. So I think there's an awful, I've said this on a podcast before, but when I was in Movistar, I had a fascinating interaction with a very young Mark Soler. We'd gone to Thuringen Rundfahrt, no, not Thuringen, Bayern Rundfahrt, which is now a stage race that doesn't exist anymore. There was a 27K TT, and afterwards, Mark Soler, I'd won it. Mark was, I don't know where Mark finished. But afterwards, he came up and he said, Alex, Spanish, the first question, first question, can I ask you about your time trial? I said, yes. He said, first question, how heavy are you? I was like,
critical.
78 kilos at the moment. He went, whoa. Well, I'm 70. I went, oh, good for you. And then the next question is like, how much power did you average? I went 395 watts. And you see him, he's like, well, I averaged 400. And then he's like, but watts per kilo? That's this much difference.
You see the mental math going on. And he's like, wait a second, why didn't I go faster than Alex?
And then he's like, but you beat me by like 2 minutes. I went, I did. And then he went, must be the aerodynamics. I went, mate, we are on the same bike, in the same skin suit, with the same helmet. It might be a bit of aerodynamics, but my guess is it isn't 2 minutes worth. And then now let me ask you a question about your TT, because Movistar would do 1 kilometer splits for everyone. I said, after 1K, I was already 10 seconds ahead of you. Like 10 seconds in a kilometer. I said, let me guess. You got down the start ramp. You sprinted like your life depended on it. You sat down. You shifted up a couple of gears. You got back out the saddle, sprinted again. He's like, yeah. Okay. So I didn't go over 500 watts. I just rolled down the start ramp and sat down, got in the tuck and let the speed come. And so I did probably 300 watts less than you did and was 10 seconds ahead of you. So now there was another section which was it was a bit unusual for time trial, and it was a downhill into an uphill. So you're kind of on a plateau, big old downhill, and then straight into an uphill. So on the downhill, how much power were you doing? He's like, 400 watts. Cool. And on the uphill, how much power were you doing? Like 400 watts. Right. I'll tell you what I was doing. When I got to the top of the downhill, sprinted a little bit, got up to like 67. Oh, and I went, how fast were you going? He said 60K an hour. I went, right. So when I got to the uphill, when I got to the top of the downhill, sprinted a little bit, sat on my top tube when it was allowed, and I was doing 70K an hour at 0 watts. So you were doing 400 watts for 60K an hour. I was going 10 kilometers an hour faster for 400 watts less than what you were doing. So then when we got to the uphill, I was doing 500 watts. So if we want a watts per kilo thing, I was beating you. As in, and second to that, I started the climb 10 kilometers an hour faster. I was doing more power, so my rate of deceleration was far less than yours would have been, already from a higher starting point. And so I crested the climb quite a bit faster than you. I don't know the exact number. So I then had less of an acceleration to make after that. So the differences there, Mark, are biblical.
Yes, there are big differences there. That's where 2 minutes are made.
Yeah.
Grand Tours. You did 7 of them.
Yep.
2 Tour de France's, 5 Giros.
Yes.
You won 2 stages in the Giro. But outside of those 2 stages, Grand Tours can be quite an experience where you end up bonding a lot with your teammates, the staff members there. You go through a lot in those 3 weeks. Are there any experiences that stand out other than the stage wins that you won over those 7 Grand Tours?
Well, I think the Tour de France, just how different the Tour is to the Giro. I never did a Vuelta, so I can't compare. But from what I hear, the Vuelta and the Giro are kind of similar in a slightly more relaxed.
Yeah, I personally prefer probably the Vuelta because you generally have slightly shorter stages than the Giro. The Giro end up with those quite long stages. But yes, it is on a similar level to the Giro, and the Tour de France is definitely an elevated experience.
Yeah, the Tour, I just felt every stage you are mentally switched on from kind of when you roll into the fan zone, really. There's so much. Whereas the Giro, is quite a bit more relaxed. I think in terms of in Israel, I've really enjoyed them because we had and in Katusha actually we had a really good crew. In Movistar, because of my own lack of an effort I could have made to learn the language more, it was a much more lonely experience. I had great teammates, but ultimately they all wanted to talk Spanish and I did not. So it was, they were lovely, but it was my fault there. So yeah, I enjoyed the Katusha and the Israel Grand Tours a lot more. I think some Grand Tours, they beat you up or you rise above it. I think there's I think it was actually Harry Sweeney on the podcast recently said he improved as the tour went on. And I think there's basically a line of fatigue and everyone's getting progressively worse, more tired. I don't know if they're getting worse because performances sometimes increase at the end, but everyone's getting more tired. And then if it's beating you up and your rate of fatigue is more than the average, you're having a horrible time.
It's a pretty grim experience.
Yeah.
I had this experience in Vuelta actually this year where I felt after about stage 13 or 14, I just wasn't recovering and I was just getting more and more tired. And normally it actually hasn't happened to me very often in Grand Tour. And I was like, man, this is actually not a very nice experience. I'm just really tired. I'm not like getting better. And then you hear, like you said, from Harry in the podcast in the last episode, where he said that he came into the welter, really suffered the first couple of days and was really worried for how his welter was going to go. But then he got better.
Yeah.
That must be nice.
Yes. My better is going from, is moving up in gruppettos, but on the days that I can race, actually being on the front foot of racing. The 2020 Giro, I just seemed to get better and better and better.
Yes, I remember this 2020 Giro. You were going quite well while Greenwich was still there. We ended up going home with COVID, but I remember you were going quite well. Yeah,
I got into a second breakaway later on in the race and really like animated it. Just felt like there was nothing I couldn't do. And that was just, I think I was ahead of that rate of deceleration, the rate of fatigue compared with the rest of the peloton.
Why? What did you change, or just happened?
Well, then we're talking about peaking and form and all of that. And I mean, that was a weird year because it was COVID year.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of time spent on a turbo trainer. There was a mid-season, off-season.
Yeah.
Far less volume, but then far less volume in the summer, but then a huge block of back-to-back racing just ahead of the Giro. And then you throw in that I was living at altitude at the same time, which I think was a good and a bad thing. I don't know. My GB ahead of Tokyo Olympics, which I didn't go to in the end, but GB asked for, because they took over my coaching, they asked for my like peaks in my career. And I'd said, there's been a couple of good races, which are the obvious ones, but actually the Tour of Guangxi in like 2019, that was peak form. Everyone was like furrowed eyebrows. I was like, I know. I was as surprised as you are. And what it had been, we'd had a horrible year. Well, a fun year at Katusha, but there'd been we had fewer riders for a start, and a lot of riders got concussions. Like a weird amount of concussions.
This is also
Boswell,
Boswell,
yeah. And so I think by the Pro Cycling Stats have the amount of top 10 for most race days. Katusha had 4 riders in that top 10. We were all on the wrong side of 90 race days. Yeah. And so it had this huge year, and then the team had gone at the end of the year, like, oh, you're off to Guangxi. I'm like, damn it, guys. I don't want to do that. You don't have a choice. So I finished Worlds, and then for 2 weeks, I just rode like 2 hours a day, really easy. Because I was like, I don't want to start my off season, but I don't want to train. It's 2 hours easy. And I'd had a good Worlds. It was the Worlds I got, I think I got 5th in Harrogate. So it was a good Worlds. So just did 2 hours, rode to the cafe and back most days. And we'd flown to Paris. It was Marco Haller's first race back after injury. Marco and me got absolutely obliterated in Paris.
This is pre-flight to China.
Pre-flight to China. He was like, well, I've spent the summer like recovering from an injury and drinking. You haven't. And I couldn't keep up with him. Marco was sharing a bed with Tony Martin. We came in about 1 a.m. and Marco was like really loudly, shh, don't wake Tony.
You're like, be late for that now, mate.
Tony's like, pulls his eye mask up, pulls an earplug out. He's like, I can hear you, arseholes. Like, sorry, Tony. So, flew to China, and it was like, a 13-hour flight, a 4-hour flight, a 5-hour bus ride.
I've done this, yes.
Went to bed, woke up, clocked an all-time 5-minute power PB in a training ride.
Wow.
Then,
interesting.
Yeah. Then got in, the team was like, what do you guys want to do in this race? And I put my hand up. I went, I want to go for GC.
And they all looked at you and were like, are you okay, Alex?
Really? But they were like, sure, fine. No, you do. I spend a lot of time working for other people. They're like, absolutely. And there was a 5-minute climb at the end of one of the stages.
Yeah, it's the only climbing stage basically in Guangxi.
Yeah, and I was like 40th, which is good for someone like me who doesn't climb. It was like another 5-minute power PB. There was breakaway day, me and Remy Cavagna were left kicking the shit out of each other. He was kicking the shit, but clocked a 30-second power PB.
Wow.
And it was, I think that year, it was just colossal volume all year with racing and training, then followed by this 2-week, and
recuperation period.
Yeah. And I think I don't know what happens like right now, but when I was racing, it was like before you are going to a target, you have a week easy. No one ever talks about 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit more about this recently as this year didn't go so well for me. And also previously, I think there was a pretty simple formula to go well. And basically the way that I went well in the past was I just did 25-hour weeks and I just did some zone 3 and then some spike zone 3 and then I was pretty good.
Yeah.
But now I think the sport's changing very fast and the demands of racing is changing quite a lot. And I feel as though now you can't get away with just doing volume and having that as like your key is like, I've just 25-hour weeks, I'll be good. Whereas now I think you need to maybe do less and be fresher because it's way more explosive and you need to have the ability to be close to setting PBs at most races. Otherwise you're just not keeping up anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's changing a little bit at the moment. Maybe the philosophy that coaches are following in World Tour coaching.
So I tried the 2-week layoff a year later for European champs.
I was about to say, were you going to suggest flying to China pre-Tokyo and getting obliterated in Paris?
No, I tried the 2-week layoff pre-European champs a year later, and it just, without the volume behind it, because that was then COVID year, without the volume, it didn't work.
It's such a tricky thing because sometimes you end up flying, you have no idea why, and sometimes you end up creeping, you have no idea why. And you try to repeat something you did the year before, completely opposite situation. Moving on a little bit here. You became a parent. Twice. You have 2 kids now.
2 of them, yeah.
Now, you had your first kid whilst you were still professional.
Yes.
How did that change your life? Because you moved to Andorra halfway or like during your professional career.
Yeah.
Was your first child born in Andorra?
Born in the UK, but whilst we were living in Andorra. Yeah, to all intents and purposes.
Yeah. So you became a parent in Andorra.
Yes.
So you were not a parent in Andorra, and then you became a parent in Andorra.
Yeah.
How did your life change? And how did it affect your racing and training? And
with one kid, I would say nothing changed not. I could still be every bit the professional that I was. Now having 2 kids, I think that would be very difficult. It's not double as hard. It's more than double as hard with 2 kids than it was one. Don't get me wrong, love them to bits. Like all the good things associated with having kids, but we're not going to skirt around the fact that it's really hard. And Chanel and I both sit there and go, imagine if I was still racing. So I think it was an odd one because Chanel was pregnant when I was staring down the barrel of an early retirement forced upon me because I didn't have a contract at the end of 2020. Then did secure another 2 years. But I think I was ready to stop in 2020. I'd kind of been like, okay, it might be happening a couple of years earlier than I thought, but ultimately I'm happy with what I've done and I'm good. Just at the point where I retired, Juliet was starting to get notice when the suitcases came out, and she wasn't happy about it, and I then wasn't happy about it, and suddenly there was no one likes spending a lot of time away from home. Like, enjoyed racing, but I like being at home, and this kind of had made it more difficult.
I have a similar thing. So I think Liam and Juliet's maybe a year older than Liam.
Yes.
And I have it now. He's 3.5 and he knows when I'm going away and he doesn't really like it. And then he also changes it at home. And then Anna, my wife, calls me when I'm away and he says, Liam's being a pain in the butt because you're not home. And I say, well, that's a bit shit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then also maybe I maybe need to adjust the way that I went about being a pro. Because I think before we had Liam, I found it very easy to be selfish.
Yeah.
And now I find it harder to be selfish. And it's not something that I really enjoy doing, but I think it's something that's almost necessary to be a professional athlete, that you need to be good at being selfish.
Yeah.
And when you have your 3-year-old son looking at you with his full face helmet on when you go to the pump track, and like, Daddy, let's go to the pump track. and you're tired. It's still pretty hard to say no though.
Yeah.
Because you're like, yeah, I kind of want to go to the pump. It's fun actually hanging out with my son going to the pump track, but probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was much easier just saying no to Anna. Like when it was just the two of us and you say, no, I'm tired. I want to do nothing for a little bit. And say, okay, whatever. I'll go hang with my friends, and she leaves and done. But I think, it does require a little bit of an adjustment.
I think I was leaning on Chanel less.
Yeah.
Because
that's the other thing that changes massively. That you no longer become like the number one thing in your partner's life anymore. And your partner is no longer anywhere near as invested in you as she was before. And you end up needing to be a lot more independent. Because I think sometimes we take for granted how much our partners help us in our career.
Yeah.
And then when you have a kid and you're like, oh, wow, that was actually really nice when you made me lunch all the time. Where's my lunch now? Yeah.
No, it's exactly that. And you do become a lot more self-sufficient. You get less selfish by looking after yourself more.
Yeah.
So I think when we moved to Andorra, certainly Chanel knew that she was her career was taking a back step so that mine could take a forward step. And then by definition, Chanel was then more invested in my career. But then when Juliet comes along, it's actually
different story kind of thing. It becomes Juliet priority number 1.
Yes. Vivian priority number 2 now. And then I come in.
You're somewhere in the back.
Yeah, 4th, 5th, because the dog as well now. So
talking of this, that's a full-time retirement life there. You've got 2 kids, dog, house, SUV.
Yeah.
Like, mate, that's full dad life.
Yeah.
Now you're retired. What happens when you retire? And what have you been doing the last 2 years?
Oh, so interesting. I was fascinated in what it was going to be like. I spent the first 6 months I did not touch a bike.
Hang on, before we get too far down this hole. I feel as though as professionals, we sometimes fantasize about what our retirement life is going to be like.
Yeah.
Is retirement life what you fantasized about? You hear these other pros like telling you, oh, when I retire, I'm going to do this. Oh, if I can't wait to retire, then I can do X or whatever it is. And then I'm actually curious whether that actually plays out.
I think I know we're going to get onto food at some point, but the food becomes like, oh, you just eat whatever I like. It's like you still can't because
you're not burning 5,000 calories a day riding your bike 6 hours.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I am grateful for is I'm very good at like knowing what I can and can't eat in terms of a quantity. I'd say I eat more shit food than I did, but quantities are still managed around.
You're just educated basically on nutrition.
Yes. For the first 6 months, I did not touch a bike, hardly, only when I absolutely had to. I skied. I enjoyed the ski life in Andorra a lot. And that was really cool because pro cycling's this weird. So I was still a paid cyclist for October, November, December, even though I was not racing, and my team give your bikes back.
So basically, to clarify, our contracts run from January 1st until December 31st, which is maybe not the most logical way for contracts to run, but it's how it's done in professional cycling. And basically, your last race can be anywhere from September to the end of October. And then you basically spend November and December normally preparing for the next season. But in the case you retire, you basically spend November and December on holidays, but being paid.
Yes. And that was great.
Because one of the things I wanted to get into is like what happens when you retire. You spend this 12 years you were pro getting a 12-month, each month a salary comes in.
Yeah.
You retire, all of a sudden that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
What happens? All of a sudden your bank account goes negative rather than positive each month, I hope.
Yeah. Basically. It's certainly, the retirement is not for some cyclists it will be, but for me it certainly isn't a case. I can sort of do nothing for the rest of my life, and I don't want to do nothing either.
So, sorry, tangent, but anyway, you enjoyed skiing, hanging out in Andorra. first 6 months after retiring.
Yeah, and we moved back to the UK in April, and then so in that January, I enjoyed October, November, December. Spent time with Juliet. Skied. Spent my time with Chanel. Just enjoyed a time in our life where we're being paid to do absolutely nothing, basically. But we had lined up. Social media for me has always been it's been a good place. So in terms of finances, the first time we could really monetize social media because I wasn't beholden to any sponsors that the team might have had.
This is another really big rabbit hole I want to go down, but this podcast can get really long if we start going down this. But the social media thing is very interesting. Do you think professional cycling is a little bit like its own worst enemy when it comes to marketing and getting new sponsors and having athletes have personalities, because we are so constrained by sponsors and maybe the culture that's built around cycling that I'm sure during your career you probably got some backlash or people maybe not being so enthusiastic about your social media. Do you think it's...
No one ever said it to my face.
Good and bad.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. I know of a rider whose agent said teams don't like you because your social media is so good. They think you look unprofessional.
Interesting take.
Yeah. I don't know if that was a lazy manager. Because the rider in question was then like, show him my training peaks.
Yeah.
You'll see I'm like 100% compliance.
Yeah.
Like, that's your job too. Or turn this into a positive. What I would say to anyone trying to build their social media is, at the moment, a huge and engaged social media following is not going to get you a pro contract. And if you have a bad year racing, you're not going to keep a pro contract from it.
Yes.
That is without a doubt.
Yes. Results are what teams want at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if you have 100,000 followers or 10.
Yeah.
If you win Tour de France, you're going to get a contract.
Exactly. And it goes the other way as well.
Yes.
Like, you could be the most followed person on the planet.
Yeah.
You're not getting a contract without results or performances. So that said, retirement, I slipped straight into
trying to monetize social media.
Yeah, and I could. And I could. It was. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was. We did well out of it. Sort of salary wise, from Israel to social media in the first year went up slightly.
Wow.
The team were not notorious high payers, but it was. Yeah, we were good. Yeah, it was fine. Quite stressful. Quite a stressful way of making a living. It's very volatile. You could lose. Contracts are short, sometimes 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. The security's not there. But we fell straight into it and it worked out well. So went from being paid to race, kind of paid to keep fit, race a little bit, and like make YouTube videos and social media from it.
And most of that revenue was coming from YouTube? Or other like
Chanel
Instagram, TikTok?
Yeah,
or, I don't know.
TikTok wasn't on TikTok. I just seemed a bit old for TikTok, if I'm honest.
I had this actually, again, tangent. Josh Tarling, I was riding with him in Gruppetto in Paris-Nice this year, and we got into the subject of TikTok, and I said, Josh, I'm 30.
Yeah.
I don't have TikTok on my phone. You're 12.
Yeah.
We're generations apart here.
We're on Instagram, so we get TikTok stuff about a month later if it's suitable. The Instagram and YouTube would be the main, but then also actually just a brand association.
Yeah.
Some brands were just happy to be able, like, can we say that you are an ambassador? Yeah. So that there was an element of that. Also, like Chanel and I as a couple was important to brands. Everyone had their own different. It's like trying to
little niches.
Yeah, and when you're pitching, you're trying to find their niche.
Yeah.
For it, and then sometimes you get surprised and like, well, actually, I think I had one where I pitched to a brand. And they're like, no, we want to talk to Chanel, not you. I was like, all right, that's fine. I'm good. So,
all right. So that's basically the first year after retirement.
Yeah.
Enjoyed yourself for 4-6 months and then did social media. Now, in this second year now, have you gotten a real job?
Continued to do that this year, just to a slightly lesser extent. Bit of coaching, aero consultancy for people in the wind tunnel. Spend a lot of time now at Silverstone wind tunnel.
Tangent again. Sorry. Biggest takeaway from the wind tunnel from now spending a lot of time there?
You spend enough time there, you can kind of guess. You can start guessing what's going.
So you can see aero, despite what Dan Bigham said or someone quoted. I heard a quote somewhere that you can't see aero.
Vague guesstimations with some of our favourite games behind the glass once the wind goes up is you sat there with whoever you're with, and often I'm with Michael Hutchinson, and it's like, right, bets in, faster or slower. And
percentage?
No, we don't. No,
in terms of like percentage of being right.
Oh, I would say 70.
How expensive are you per hour?
It's more than £500 an hour, I think.
No, I'm trying to compare you to the wind tunnel.
Oh.
I want Alex can see aero versus me going to the wind tunnel. Just sending Alex a WhatsApp image of me on the turbo trainer, and it saves me a lot of money and time.
That's like my favorite on Instagram. If someone would put a time trial picture up and you just write a CDA underneath.
I'm getting you employed here. You're going to start a new business. It's going to be alexcanseeaero.com.
Matty Mahorich came up to me once. He was like, Alex, what do you think about my position? I was like, I don't know. He's like, because you'll know my CDA, won't you? I was like, yeah.
0.19.
Yeah, sure. I was like, and I love that's the sort of the mentality some riders have around me.
All right, sorry, I'm getting derailed again. As a professional cyclist and maybe professional athlete that's in a weight-conscious sport, food and body weight and body image can be a delicate subject and something we probably spend too much time thinking about. And I always say that we maybe don't have an eating disorder, but there's definitely a lot of us that have disordered eating.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you stop being a professional cyclist, you stop training 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week, and you stop needing to also kind of consume specific foods. And as nutrition has got more important in cycling, I think diets have become more maybe bland or just a lot more carbohydrate focused. So then the types of foods that you can eat become a little bit narrower. And generally as humans, we like to eat food with sugar and fat in it.
Yeah.
And as an athlete, fat's generally not the nicest thing to include in your diet, even though it tastes very good. Now, how does the relationship with food change once you stop? Because like you said, you can more or less eat whatever you want. To an extent, you'll still get fat.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to not be.
Yes. Because you do see some people retire from cycling and they've quite clearly struggled with changing the way that they eat.
Yeah.
And understanding that they're no longer riding their bike 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And that you cannot eat like you're riding 4 hours a day.
Yeah. I would, with that, I've always wondered if there's a correlation between that and how they retired.
Ah, interesting.
Whether retirement was their choice, they were happy with it, or whether retirement was forced upon them and out of their control.
Yeah, they just weren't happy that they were retiring.
Injury, sickness,
contract not getting renewed.
Yeah. So then they end up hating the sport that they loved. For me, I think there was two factors to it. One was the job I was stepping into, the sponsorship model.
You still need to have the image of being somewhat fit person.
Need to be quite fast still, because I'm going and doing the UK time trial scene. That's not like, there are no slouches there. I'm not rocking. I didn't win any national TT titles there. John Archibald, actually, who spent a stint at Eolo Contador's team, I did the national 50 this year, 50 mile TT, so 80k. And I thought I had a really good ride. I know my aero's dialed. He pumped me for 4 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
And I actually was looking at it and going, I don't know if full World Tour form if I was going to
All right, so we've kind of gotten on a tangent here, but someone actually asked the question, why are you still racing? And what's it like to race at an amateur level?
Still racing because...
You enjoy getting changed in car parks?
Yeah, I enjoy the time trialing. I've always enjoyed time trialing. That's been what I have enjoyed. And I feel like I've got my fix from it. I don't know how much more I'm going to be doing. It'll be announced fairly soon, but things are changing for me into a more, still very much within cycling, but more of a job.
A real job.
A real job. Whoa, I still don't know if it's a real job. And I feel like I've got my fix now. It was never about, it was part like representing brands. I think also the UK racing scene is really struggling at the moment. And I knew my presence at racing was going to help those races. And I wanted to support various organisers who were making a big effort to try and like help the UK racing scene. And I enjoyed that I could, for the first time ever, be in the same bunch as my mates. Mm-hmm. Or my mates that I trained with when I lived in the UK. I enjoyed that, but like I said, I feel like I've got my fix now. I don't know how much more you'll be seeing me at bigger UK races. Probably going to my local TT and doing that still. The second side of it is actually my haemophilia. As a kid, all the way through, my doctors have always stressed the importance of fitness and health and not being overweight, because
fair enough.
Internal bleeding into joints and muscles can be worse if they are weak and if they're carrying more load than is necessary. So there is an element of keeping weight off for that reason as well. So I'm
that's a pretty good motivator, to be honest.
Yeah, I do have quite a bit of I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but just worry about putting on too much weight. And then cause you see also, I see how much of a struggle it is for some people.
Yeah.
I think it'd be easier to not get into the position where I need to deal with it quite aggressively.
100%.
Rather than just, it's like spinning a plate, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's hard to keep it spinning when it's fallen off the stick and cracked. Yeah. I'd rather just,
keep it on the center, keep it spinning. Now,
I'm sorry, on that though, I would say, I think there's if we're talking like body image and stuff, on a regular occasion, I'll rock up to a cycling event and someone's like, "Are you retired?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they'll look me up and get down and go, "You're not retired, you're still." And I'm like, "Well, no, actually, I do 8 hours a week training.
Yeah.
Because I like keeping fit. This is a fitness thing. This isn't, I'm not trying to be what I was. I mean, there's bike riders that do that and are absolutely fine. But I'm trying to stay fit.
And I imagine you probably just enjoy riding the bike as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and doing 8 hours is probably a nice amount of hours to do to enjoy riding the bike.
It is.
Now that you're retired, do you retrospectively look back on your career and things that you thought were really good ideas in the moment when you were a pro, and you look back on them now and you're just like, why did I think that was a good idea? Or like, you're like, I was so caught up in this lifestyle or this trying to become the best version of yourself as a pro that you maybe didn't see the bigger picture of it, and you have sort of like the blinders on, you're just going down this rabbit hole, and when you look back now you're like, why did I do that?
Well, with the benefit of hindsight,
I
mean, we can all look back and win that thing that we didn't win.
Yeah, maybe not talking about winning a certain bike race, maybe talking about training approaches or nutrition approaches or something where you were just like, why did I once think doing 30 hours a week for 4 weeks in a row was going to get me in form?
Yeah. I think probably mine's just centered around nutrition.
Yeah.
Periods of just like starving myself. More as an under 23, I'd say, but that was just kind of being in a toxic house.
Yes. And also probably in that period of time as well, it was just a bit of a toxic environment regarding body image in cycling. I think we're getting better now. But I think back then it was very much trying to your own detriment, being skinny and starving yourself. Yeah,
absolutely. And it was interesting because I'd say maybe we've mentioned him, but Josh Tarling, I thought his interview after Worlds was really interesting because I related to that. I think I spent a lot of my career waiting to be good.
Yeah.
And And the retiring has been interesting because I've looked back on my time and thought, that period was when I was like good.
This is a very hard thing to grapple with, and something that I've thought quite a bit this year, having not ridden so well. It's scary to think. I really hope that I am able to ride well again in the future, but it's scary to think that maybe I have ridden the best I'm ever going to ride.
Yeah, that's. I stood top step of Commonwealth Games podium with Rowan Dennis to my right and Geraint Thomas to my left, thinking, yeah, this is fine. Olympics.
Yeah, I similar thing. I was looking back at photos and I saw a photo of me on the podium in Welter. I'm there with Aaron Mass and Primos, and I was like, man, I hope I can get kind of close to that one day again, but maybe that was peak Jack.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's kind of scary.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't think it is at the time.
In the moment, like you said, we're so driven as athletes and things like this, you're always looking to the next thing forward. You never actually realize in that moment or sort of take time in that moment to appreciate what you just achieved. You're just like you were saying, you stood in that Commonwealth Games podium and you're like, Olympics.
Yeah. So the only one I did truly enjoy was that final stage of the Giro that I won. Yeah. Second final.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't win road races. I always saw me winning a road race was a luck-based thing, not a performance-based thing. So I was like, this is once a decade. This is a once a decade thing that I win a pro road race. So this is it. This is the final road race that Alex Dowsett ever wins. I'm going to bloody well enjoy it. So I would say as well, because I did a book.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this.
Yeah.
Someone wrote in the Discord channel that they really liked your book.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was, and I had help write. I had a ghostwriter. It's nice because, and that was the first thing, validating that you've actually had a good career.
Yeah.
Is a publisher coming to you. No, and I'm not saying that's there's loads of ways to validate that you've had a good career, and some people won't need validation.
But I think a lot of us do. Because I think a lot of us, same with what I was saying before, we're always looking forward to the next thing, never really appreciating the things that we've done.
Yeah.
And yeah, at some point, maybe you need someone external to validate, like, oh, actually, you know what? You were bloody good at riding a bike.
Yeah. So the publisher comes to you and goes, we think there's merit. We think your story is good enough for a book. That's the first, like, wow, okay, that's big. And then I remember the Tom, the ghostwriter, I just had this, I always had this underlying feeling that I wasn't doing enough, that I was just a little bit lazy. And Sepp Van Mark said it to me once as well, actually. We were on a training camp in Livigno, and he was like, Alex, I hope you don't mind me saying, I've always just thought you were a bit lazy, a bit like, you didn't give 110%, but I actually, having spent some time with you, I see that you do. I had that underlying feeling as well. And Tom said, he's like, oh, did you ever miss training? I went, no, it was non-negotiable. He said, oh, did you, what about your eating? Did you were you overweight? I was like, yeah, but not through a lack of trying.
Yeah, it wasn't like you're having beers and pizza for dinner.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, did you party? I went, no, never.
Yeah.
He said, then at what point did you, where does this laziness? And I was like, I think I always just felt like however much I was doing, someone was going to be spending 5 or 10 minutes more out on the bike than I was. Someone's going to do that extra interview or extra interval. Or someone's going to be spending the evening stretching whilst I'm sat on the sofa.
Now we're into the psychology of professional athletes.
Yeah.
And it's a very weird realm to delve deep into. And we probably don't have enough time to do it. But like you said, it can be to a lot of athletes' detriments, thinking that someone's always doing more than them. Yeah. And then they do the 5-hour training ride with the team, and they say, I just need to do 20 minutes more. So I need to do more than everyone else. Or, I'm going to eat 1 bowl less of rice. Because I'm going to be skinnier, so I need to do this less.
Yes.
So I'm more professional. But like you said, it can be a scary mentality to have. Yeah.
So I think having gone through that process of writing the book and having it all written down, and then seeing that actually Commonwealth Games 2014 was one of peak Alex times, and I should be proud of that. Just the fact that I used to do 6-hour training rides, or even just 4-hour training rides. You know how, you won't know this yet because you're not retired. You know how long that is to spend on a bike? I go out for a ride now. If I have a window where I can go for a bike ride, I tell you, the novelty wears off And it goes from being an enjoyable experience to like, this is hard, at about an hour 15.
Yeah. See, I have it at about 4 hours now because I'm still pro, where I'm like, I can do a 4-hour ride. I can do about 2.5, 3 hours, stop at a cafe, and then do another hour and a half or an hour. And that's still an enjoyable ride for me.
Yeah.
But I do imagine that when you retire, that window gets a lot shorter.
Yeah, massively. And so I think off the back of that, I actually have so much more respect for myself and what I did and how hard I committed than I ever did when I was in it.
Yeah.
Which is a nice place to be. Like when I was a kid, I used to have this conversation with my dad where people were like, as long as you try your best, like that's all that counts. I always used to think that was a real like cop out of an expression. I was just like, I think it was just bandied round. You're just like, you just do your best in school. It's like, but I think in the second half of my career, I became a little less this has been a time trialist as well, a little less interested in the result and more interested in
the process,
but actually how I arrived at the start line. Because so if we're going to delve into doing your best, I could line up to a time trial now and I could do my best for the next 20 minutes of a TT. But for me, actually doing your best was getting to that start line, knowing there was nothing left. And I think that's where doing your best becomes a really important expression, an important phrase that's then glossed over quite a lot. So that became like my mantra for more the second half of my career. Is like, and then when I finished, I was like, actually, like, sure. First half of my career, I was young, like naive, uneducated. Like when I was older and much more experienced, I was happy that I arrived at the start line, and that was everything I could do. I think my final year, I had a good winter. All my kit was optimized. I didn't really care so, and it's like a throwback to the power meter conversation. Didn't really care so much for the race, Terreno time trial. And on the warm up, I was looking at my power meter, and we had questionable power meters that year. And I was like, power meter's not working. There's no way I'm just sat at 400 watts with like 120 heart rate. So we're just going to ignore that for the race. Went out the blocks, settled in. Every so often I looked at the power meter and it was always 500 and something. I went, wow, this must be what it feels like to be Ghana, you know, like rattled around. And I'd said to the team, like, can you set me off early so I can go back to the hotel and watch Netflix?
Yeah.
And finished, and I rolled back to the bus. They're like, no, you need to go back. You're in the hot seat. I was like, annoying. So I rolled back and waited. And in the end, I eventually got knocked off the hot seat. But it was Ghana won it. Remco was second. Pogacar was third. Askren was fourth. I was fifth.
That's a class couple of names you read there.
And then I realised the power meter was right. I'd had a golden day on the day that you'd want one. I had 465 watts average for, what was it, 12 or 14K? Yeah, it's a 10K. And I sat there going like, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Like that, it doesn't get better than that. And it's a class result, but it's only good enough for fifth. Like, it's not a win.
Yeah, this comes back to what I was saying before, where it's kind of scary when you realize that you're close to being the best, but you're still very far away from being the best.
Yeah.
And it's quite frustrating in the moment sometimes as well. You're just like, dang, like that's a golden day, but I'm not top 5.
Yeah.
You're like, shit, these guys are really good.
Yeah. And I had quite a few of them. It would be something like watching Ethan Hayter's wheel just slip away at the crest of a crucial climb in the Tour of Britain. I was like, if I was just like 0.5% better, I would be. But that's where we're all operating, isn't it? And ultimately, like,
small margins, but big differences.
Yeah. It's like the Vuelta podium. You're probably like less than 1% worse than Primoz.
Yeah.
But that was enough.
Yeah.
And then someone else, like someone in the Gruppetto, is probably like 3% worse than 3 or 4% worse than you.
Someone that's running, podium with top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're the margins we all operate in.
Yeah. It's a frustratingly small margin, but a very large actual gap. Anyway, we should probably wrap that up. We got a wedding to get to later, mate.
Yes.
So thanks for the chat.
That was good.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Hope everyone did.
Yeah.
Let's get ready for the wedding.
Cool.
See you.
Thank you.